Hey there.
Hey there. What's going on?
So my daughter was dropped off close to school this morning, but never made it. I went to pick her up from school.
I'm sorry, one second.
Yeah.
That was quick, but it was Jenn Soto telling the police about the last time her daughter, Madeline Soto, was seen alive. The only problem is the story wasn't true. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to spot a made-up story using deception detection techniques. I'm Deception Detective, an attorney trained in statement analysis, and this channel exposes lies and manipulation. Since that clip was so short, I'm going to play it again before we discuss.
This is Mom.
This is Mom? Okay.
Hey there.
Hi there.
Hey there.
Hey there. What's going on?
So my daughter was dropped off close to school this morning, but never made it. I went to pick her up from school.
I'm sorry, one second.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
Telling a made-up story is hard, especially in a stressful situation like talking to a cop. So most liars end up keeping their scripted stories short and sweet. That way there's less chance of making a mistake or slipping up and revealing too much. That said, the officer did cut Jenn off here, so we can't say just yet that her story's suspiciously short. To do that, we need to listen to her tell it in full, which she does a few minutes later.
I don't know. She got dropped off. She was like, so she's embarrassed by his car. So she didn't want to be dropped off at school. She wanted to be dropped off like half a block away so she can walk.
She's in the face.
But he dropped her off half a block away and drove away.
Okay. Did she ever go to school though?
No, we called
She
school.
was walking in that direction. She was rifling through her backpack, just looking for something. I thought maybe she was just looking for headphones before she got her walking on.
Yeah.
But she was just kind of, shambling over in that direction. It looked the same as any other morning.
Okay.
What was the last thing you asked?
If she went to school, I think that's what it was.
So I got confirmation from the school that she never made it. They sent me an email saying she didn't make it. But I also spoke to her or emailed one of her teachers directly, and he looked at all her attendance for all her periods and told me she didn't make it at all today.
Okay.
Not only is the full story short, but it's vague, and this is the second hallmark of a scripted story. Whether it's done consciously or unconsciously, liars often keep their lies vague. This makes them harder to fact-check. It reduces the chances of contradictions, especially if there's a co-conspirator like we have here with Jenn and Stefan. And most importantly, it allows the liar to tailor their story to any new evidence the police might find down the road. To illustrate just how vague Jenn's story is, ask yourself, who dropped Madeline off? We don't actually know that, and that's because she said Madeline was dropped off. In other words, she used a passive voice. So we don't know if Jenn did it, Stefan did it, or they both did it together, or some third party did it. Where was Madeline dropped off? That's also unclear. Was it a half block from the school, or a block and a half away, or even further? Which side of the road was it on? What landmark or distinguishing feature was it near? And finally, when was Madeline dropped off? Was it 9, 9:15, 9:45? How long did Stefan sit there and watch her? These are all details that I would expect the actual parents of missing children to give because they're useful. Remember, this is the last time her daughter was seen alive. We could reasonably expect her to be racking her brains about every detail of those final seconds and minutes and hours. After the police finished this interview with Jenn, a few hours later, they discovered footage of a girl resembling Madeline at a church near the school around the time that Madeline was allegedly dropped off. So before I play the interview that Jenn gave to the news the next day, let's do some practice. Will Jenn tailor her vague story to match this newly discovered evidence, or will her story remain exactly the same? Or will the story change completely and have a whole bunch of new details? If you've seen my videos about reminiscence effect, you'll probably get this right. If not, I'll explain what that is the next time I pause.
We dropped her off at school, close to school. She wanted to walk the rest of the way. I'm not sure what I'm allowed to share.
You share whatever you feel comfortable sharing. I know you had conversations with detectives. Not sure what that conversation is, but whichever you feel comfortable sharing that We'll put the awareness out there.
Yeah, she was spotted walking by the church, by the middle school, on the cameras. They saw her hang out in the parking lot for a little bit and then get up and leave. They didn't see a vehicle or anything else. They just saw her walk away around 9 a.m. heading towards the school, but she never made it.
I've analyzed this interview in great detail in my video, Does She Have Guilty Knowledge, from a few months ago. But in this video, I want to point out that we have one new detail and only one new detail, that Madeline was dropped off near the church. And that brings me to my third hallmark of scripted stories. They're rigid. As strange as it might seem, true stories often evolve with time, especially in the hours and days following a traumatic event. And that's because the victims sit there for hours, thinking, searching their memory, trying to improve their recall about any potential clues or details that they overlooked or forgot about on that fateful day. So when they tell the story in future interviews, there's often new details that are added or prioritized. And this phenomenon is known as the reminiscence effect. So when I listen to this version of Jenn's story, I don't hear someone who's searched her memory for new details like I would expect. I hear someone who has tailored their highly scripted story just enough to incorporate new evidence, which is exactly what vague stories are designed to do. They're also designed to minimize contradictions between co-conspirators, which is why there's no reminiscence effect in scripted stories. Every detail they add is a potential stumbling block if they ever get interviewed separately. So it's in their interest to change the story as little as possible. Now let's watch Jenn's final interview, which she gave the day after this one.
Go ahead and tell us what's going on with Maddie.
Well, Monday morning, we took her to school. We dropped her off close to school, across the street from a church, which is it's right next to the school. She crossed the street and walked to school, what we thought walked to school. My boyfriend who drove her to school drove away at that point. It was seen on video footage that she hung out in the parking lot of the church for a few minutes and then got up and walked towards the school. But she never made it for that walk and that was around 9 a.m. when she got up. She never made it to school after that. It's right next to the school. I don't know why she didn't make it. I don't know if something happened on her walk along the way or if she got taken, but she never made it.
And that was the last anyone's seen of her or heard from her?
Yes.
Jerry McCann wasn't around when his wife Kate discovered their daughter missing, yet he had zero suspicion that she might have done something. John Ramsey wasn't in the room when his wife discovered their daughter JonBenet missing, yet he had zero suspicion that she had anything to do with it. Don Wells wasn't even on the property when his daughter Summer Wells went missing, in the care of his wife Candace and his mother-in-law, but he had no suspicion. Chris Proudfoot was in another state when his stepson Sebastian Rogers went missing, but he had no suspicion of his wife Kate. My point is, scripting a plausible story is hard enough, and delivering it convincingly makes it doubly hard. But once you have a co-conspirator, another person, it makes it exponentially more difficult because now you have to improv. You have to actually act like parents who don't know what happened to their kid. And I didn't see that in any of those cases, and I don't see it here. As far as Jenn's story goes, Stefan was the last person to see Madeline alive. He's not even related to her. He's just Jenn's boyfriend. Yet she has zero suspicion that he may have some culpability or know something that he isn't telling her about the disappearance. For me, that does not track, and it's part of my assessing stories card from the deception deck. The reasonableness and tone of the story. And while we're on the topic of Stefan Stearns, let's analyze his version of events.
The first question is if I can get your first and last name and spell them both out for me.
Stefan Stearns, STEPHANSTERNS.
All right, so Stefan, you seem very emotional. right now? Explain to us.
I dropped her off. Everything looked fine when I drove away. It's the last time we saw her.
What were the conversations that y'all had in the car when you dropped her off?
Not much. She was asleep for most of the way. Told her have a good day at school when she got out. I love her. She said thanks, love you too. That was it.
And so where do you think she could possibly be? I mean, this isn't, as I was told, this isn't normal behavior.
This is not normal behavior. She's not the type that would just run off. We don't know where she can be. We're scared. We just want her home.
What do you notice in all these interviews? Here's the first interview. Here's the second interview with WFTV. And here's the third interview with Fox News. Stephen Stearns is with Jenn every time she tells this story. And this is typical of co-conspirators. And they do this for 3 reasons. First, they need to avoid contradicting each other in case they ever get split up and have to tell their story separately. So every time Jenn tells a story, Stephen has to be near her so he can hear what she's saying and make sure that he matches up everything with her. Second, they have to ensure that their dynamic is plausible. And as I pointed out last time I paused, I think they failed on this terribly. And third, because co-conspirators know that one could always just turn on the other, they have to divide up culpability in their stories. And I think this might be part of the reason that they constantly say, well, we dropped her off, and I dropped her off, or Stefan dropped her off, because they want the option to be able to share culpability in case one turns on the other. Of course, I might be giving them more credit than they're due. It might just be because they're bad liars and it's a made-up story, so it's hard to actually use the correct pronoun every time you tell it. And he also conveniently demonstrated all the hallmarks of a scripted story that Jenn did earlier in her interviews, like no reminiscence effect, being totally vague, and being extremely reticent. The cards I've been showing on screen throughout this video are from my deception deck, my 52 favorite rules for spotting lies and manipulation. And one of them is dedicated to proactively figuring out if someone is telling you a made-up story. So before I wrap up this video, I'll just read you this card so that you have 4 techniques in your toolkit if you ever get the chance to question someone who you suspect is telling you a made-up story, rather than having to use all these techniques to figure out if they're doing it from afar. When dealing with uncooperative subjects, a key tactic is to increase their cognitive load. The stress of lying, combined with this increased mental demand, can significantly disrupt a liar's thought process. Effective techniques include surprise, asking unexpected questions that someone fabricating a story is unlikely to have anticipated. In other words, I do wish the police had split up Jenn and Stefan and asked them what did Madeline have for breakfast that morning, because that's probably not something they scripted out beforehand. Detail, probing for intricate details that are often omitted in a fabricated narrative. In this case, it would be a very specific detail like, what was she wearing? And they tend to mess that up. Third, reversal, requesting the subject to recount their story in reverse chronological order. And fourth, speed, demanding quick responses and imposing penalties for hesitation. Want to see me analyze another story I think is scripted? Click the video on your screen now. If you want to continue the series, let's get this video to 50,000 views. You can also become a channel member and vote on who we analyze next. Until next time, stay true.